I'll go ahead and launch the recording. Good afternoon from Boston, Massachusetts, but welcome to good morning and good evening from wherever you're tuning in from around the world. Welcome to our ECHO program and our October session where we feature Jan Hollenbeck and the topic Empowering Independence, OT's role in fostering self-determination in schools. Before I head over to Jan, I would like to share with you some ongoing and consistent logistics that we have for this amazing program. We do provide you continuing education certificate, but that is only until you do a few things. For one, we do ask that you complete our pre-survey of our questions. That link will be dropped in the chat. You will see it there. Thank you, Kelsey. Please take your minute to fill that out as well. You will also be required to stay for the whole session and complete the post-assessment link. When you do those three things and hopefully contribute in your small groups, we'll be sending you a certificate of attendance to thank you for joining us. All right. We welcome Jan to the floor. Thank you, Jan. The floor is yours for at least the next 20 to 25 minutes or so.
Time is tight. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see you all here. My name's Jan Hollenbeck. I am an occupational therapist and have worked in the public schools in the United States in Massachusetts for most of my career. I've done publishing and lots of presenting on a variety of topics, all related to working in the public school setting. I'm excited to be here today. I'm talking about really one of my passions, empowering independence, OT's role in fostering self-determination in schools. And it's, I think, kind of an underrepresented topic or area for OTs often. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And all right. Are you seeing my slide? Yes? Okay. All right. So it's a really tight time frame, these talks. So I'm kind of conscious of that, but I will not be reading everything on my slides. You will have that to have, for use later. But I will go through till we get to the point where we talk about a case study. So self-determination in the schools, I think in the United States, and I know we have people from all over here, but we kind of got in this kind of narrow lane of fine motor, sensory, and handwriting that we tend to address in the United States in the public schools. And we are occupational therapists. We look at occupation and meaningful participation in life. And some of the things that we might address kind of incidentally, just through when we work with students, like self-determination, are things that I really feel should be a primary focus of occupational therapists in the school and in other settings. So what I talk about today is really applicable to lots of different settings that OTs may work in, but I am focusing specifically on school practice. So I'll start by defining what self-determination is, why it's important, how it aligns with occupational therapy, and then ways that we as OTs can incorporate this in our intervention with students, as well as in our work with teachers and parents. And then we'll end with a case study. So self-determination is really believing that you can control your own destiny and your own life. It's a combination of attitudes and abilities. It leads people to believe in themselves, to know their strengths and weaknesses and interests, to be able to manage their feelings and behaviors, to make choices, to solve problems, to set goals, to really control and be a leader in their own lives. It is something that different people in different publications will break down the components of self-determination perhaps a little differently. But for the purpose of today, these 9 kind of components of self-determination are what I'm going to be talking about. This is from the I'mDetermined.org. The I'm Determined Project, which is the state of Virginia Department of Education, has this wonderful site with all sorts of free resources. So if you're interested in this topic, it has the imdetermined.org, the link is there on the slide. It has lots of wonderful resources for free that anybody can use related to being self-determined. And it's the unique thing about that website is that it starts with young kids, not high school age, which often is what happens here as we start as teens and teenagers to start to really focus more directly on these things. Whereas what we need to be doing is really starting earlier. So a wonderful website for you that you should be able to access without any difficulty. So I don't need to define all these. You know what choice making is and decision making is and problem solving, as well as goal setting and attainment. These are all components of self-determination. Self-regulation, which is something that OTs often address, often calling it sensory regulation, but it's often broader than that, helping individuals to kind of understand what's happening with their focus, their attention, their bodies, and be able to be regulated to participate in whatever the task at hand is. Self-advocacy is a big one, being able to understand your own needs and to be able to advocate for those needs. If students go on from public school to college or to jobs and they don't have this ability to self-advocate, they really do run into challenges. That's one of the biggest problems we see for students with disabilities who go on to college is they don't have those self-advocacy skills to really ask for and make sure they get what they need to succeed. So that's something that's really important that we work with as young as possible all the way up through to adulthood. To really develop those skills. Internal locus of control is really believing that you have control over the outcomes of your own life. And self-efficacy is related to that, but believing that you actually you have the ability to succeed in specific situations or tasks. And then self-awareness is the basic understanding of one's own strengths, needs, and abilities. And I think even just looking at these, it should be clear as occupational therapists that these fit right within our scope of practice. But again, as I said, we often don't directly address all of these, some of these perhaps. So self-determined behavior is about a person taking control over their own life and making choices based on their interests and needs. It involves knowing oneself, setting goals, and taking action to achieve them. And this is going to look different at different ages. So what you see in a young child versus as they get older and into their teenage and young adult years, it kind of shifts and develops over time. So young students in the early grades, this is self-determination, is really a foundational skill. It's often about making choices and doing things that are moving toward being more self-determined, but in a much more structured environment for the little ones. So a student might choose the book to read during free time or selects what they're going to write about for a writing topic. Or they tell the teacher they don't understand the instructions for an assignment and they ask for clarification. Those are all self-determined behaviors that can start very young for students. And then as students get older, teenage years, it's more complex. It's more about really kind of owning and preparing for their future. So researching different colleges or trade schools that align with their career interests, making sure the classes they take are the right ones so that they can get into the school they want to get into, asking a teacher for specific accommodations, like they might need more time to take a test or to do a longer assignment, but being able to ask for what they need and explain why. Those are all things that are a little more complex and more initiated by the student as they get older into those teenage years. The importance of self-determination is really clear. You'll see in the next few slides, but making sure that individuals with disabilities can live meaningful lives and contribute to society. And it is a basic human right to be able to pursue your personal goals without external interference. Outcomes are a big piece of this. So when we talk about youth with disabilities, they are consistently found to have poorer post-school outcomes than their non-disabled peers, less likely to complete school, attend further college, to be employed, less likely to live independently. And in fact, in the US, the Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows that 21.3% of people with disabilities are employed and 65.4% of people without disabilities are employed. So there's still a big difference between individuals with and without disabilities in terms of successful adult living and employment and living independently in all those areas. We also know that students who are more self-determined have better post-school outcomes in employment, education, community living. Okay, and we know that individuals with disabilities are less self-determined than their non-disabled peers, and that they have fewer opportunities to make choices and act in a self-determined way. So when you have students with disabilities, it almost is the greater the disability, the greater the needs, the more the adults around those students and their peers end up making choices for them and taking away those opportunities for choice. So we find that individuals with disabilities, as they're growing and developing, have fewer opportunities to even practice these skills, and when they actually need more opportunities to practice these skills to be able to master them. There's research also that shows that when we do address it intentionally and methodically, that these are skills that can be developed. So you're not just born with them and have them or don't have them. These are things that we can work on and develop and really grow in a student. We also know that research is showing that parents of children with disabilities provide fewer opportunities for their kids to make choices and decisions, to have trial and error, to set and work on personal goals. So we also, in addition to working with the students themselves, working with teachers and parents and any adults around the students to make sure that they understand the importance that the student needs to learn to be able to make choices and decisions and problem solve and all of those skills that are so important in adult living. We, in our role as occupational therapists in the schools, I think one of the biggest things we can do is increase awareness and opportunities. So really working with the teachers and the other staff to help them to understand these skills are very important things. They're, yes, the students need to learn to read and do math and learn history and all of those other academic areas, but in order to be successful in life, they also need to be self-determined. And there's lots of ways that these things can be worked on in the context of the curriculum, of the academic curriculum and the routine of the school day. But it has to be, people need to be aware that that's important. We want to reduce learned helplessness, which is kind of what happens when an individual with a disability always has things done for them. They don't have the opportunity to develop the skills and understand that they can do things for themselves. So they have this, what's called learned helplessness. Also, dignity of risk. Historically, there's been a focus on safety, which is very important for caregivers of individuals with disabilities, but to the extent that they're completely taking away any risk in anything for these individuals. Historically, this has been a problem, and that we talk about dignity of risk, allowing individuals with disabilities to be able to take risks within a reasonable risk like anyone else might take, to learn from that and to grow and to develop their self-determination skills. Starting early is another key component of this when we're working with students in the school setting. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we tend to start this in high school, and we need to start way before that in order to really build a foundation. And there's also been research that shows that students who are more self-determined even at a younger age, that this fosters their academic success. So working on this with the young kids is going to help them to do better academically throughout their school years. Increases their independence, promotes positive outcomes, which we talked about, and then helps them to be able to advocate as they get older. When we think about how this aligns with OT, I think it's pretty clear. If you're an OT, you understand that all these things I'm talking about make perfect sense. But one example, Michael Waymeyer, he's one of the gurus of self-determination, I think internationally, definitely in the US. He emphasizes the relationship between self-determination and a person's quality of life, and argues that self-determination is not just about achieving outcomes, but also about a person's sense of purpose, satisfaction, and overall well-being. And if that's not OT, I don't know what is. I mean, we're all about meaningful participation, purpose, having purpose, being able to participate in the occupations that are important to us. So it is a perfect fit for OT. And I think my whole goal in talking about this topic is that OTs think more intentionally about this and address it in a more intentional way so that it's not just, yeah, we do some of this when we're already working with a student on other goals, but it's not the prime focus of what we're doing oftentimes, has been my experience. So really thinking more intentionally about this. I'm going to go through these quickly because this is really about kind of our OT practice framework that we have in the US. The American Occupational Therapy Association describes what our role is, but we are client-centered and strength-based, focused. And so that definitely aligns with working on self-determination, understanding strengths and needs, working with the client or the student, the child, on what's important to them. We're also holistic and we have a contextual approach. So we look at the environment in addition to just the student or the child. So we want to look at what's around them that can support or hinder their performance, their ability to demonstrate these self-determination skills or develop these skills. Promoting self-advocacy is something that is definitely in our OT practice framework, and that we work with students to help them to learn and practice how to self-advocate, maybe do role playing on how to talk to a teacher. It's intimidating for a student to be able to say to a teacher, I need this in order to be able to pay attention in class or whatever it might be. But we as OTs often address that kind of thing where we help the student to get more comfortable and practice and then go to the teacher and ask those questions or make those requests of the teacher or have that conversation with the teacher. Embedding self-determination in daily life. We want to not only address this if we're doing kind of a one-to-one session with a student or a child, we want to really make sure this happens during the school day. So looking at the areas during the day that these things can be incorporated, so that they're happening in a more natural setting and not just in a pull-out kind of one-to-one treatment situation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about different things we can do across the grades and ages. Again, one of the big things here is we often start working on these in an intentional way a little too late in my experience. So thinking about even a 3-year-old, you can do some of these things, choice making and problem solving. And so what do you think you need to do? You can't get your boot on. What do you need to do? What can you do? How can you solve that problem? Well, I could ask my teacher. Yes, you could ask your teacher. But only after you try yourself, kind of thing. So one of the things that is just a really big piece of what we do as OTs is we look at that prompt hierarchy and we want to encourage independence, but be aware that self-determination is not the same thing as independence. So if you think about an individual who has perhaps a physical disability where they cannot dress themselves or shower themselves, they need assistance for that. They can be fully self-determined because they're able to direct their personal care assistant who helps them with dressing and showering. They're selecting their clothing. They're instructing the assistant to do things in the way that they want them to be done. So they can be fully self-determined, but not physically independent with all those tasks. So that's just an example of how independence is not the same thing as self-determination, but independence is something that we tend to not allow students with disabilities to have as many opportunities to be more independent. So knowing and helping others, especially helping others, because I think we as OTs know this, but productive struggle is okay. Being careful to not assume the student needs assistance. I know sometimes we have teacher assistants in the schools, and they sometimes are moms, and so they're coming back to work after being home and being a mom, and they just want to help that student with the disability by helping too much. They want to do it for them. They want to really help them and not have them struggle at all. But that struggle is really important in learning and developing these skills. And then looking at the prompt hierarchy and helping teachers to really understand how much are you helping that student and do they really need all of that help? When is it something they can do on their own or with a little less help? Addressing these skills, as I mentioned before, at the point of participation. So during actual occupational performance, during actual functional things, during actual school classroom academics is when we want these things integrated in. So we may work on a skill separately with a student, but then we want to find a way to make sure that it's being addressed in the context of the school day. So perhaps we're working on self-regulation and teaching the student how to recognize how they're feeling, how their attention is, and if they need to do certain strategies to get them focused on something in the classroom, what strategies can they use in order to calm themselves and focus themselves? So you may work on some of that one-to-one with a student, but then you have to make sure that you're actually getting that to be addressed in the classroom, in the context of the day. So can the student do that during the school day, and what kind of supports do they need to be able to develop those skills to use in context, in real life? So again, I mentioned this a minute ago, but how do you thinking about these components and how you already incorporate these, regardless of what population you work with? I know I'm focusing on school, but whether you're working with adults or children, it doesn't matter. These are all things that can be within the OT scope of practice. So thinking about how you incorporate these now and how you can maybe address these more intentionally as you go forward in your work with your clients. What do I have for time? Not a lot, right? 2:30 or 2:25 do I need to end?
2:30 is fine.
2:30 is fine? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I will go through, I have a slide for each of the 9 areas, and I'll just kind of briefly go through these, and you'll have more on here that you can go back and look at later that will give you some ideas for things you can do with students. So choice making, can be so simple, like selecting the color paper they want for their art project in school, deciding which game they want to play or which playground thing they want to climb on at recess, deciding who to partner with during a classroom activity. So instead of the teacher kind of dictating those things, really working within the classroom to give all children really opportunities for making those kind of choices. Decision making, you may have a student who can write but can't write a lot. Their hand fatigues or their writing kind of isn't great after they write for a period of time, and they also have a computer. How does helping that student to determine when they get an assignment in class, which way do they do it? Do they do it with paper and pencil, or do they do it on the computer? Or which after school club to join? Teaching them how to make decisions. Which after school club to join? Well, what are your interests? What do you like to do? What do you not like to do? And maybe narrow it down looking at the clubs and then go visit a couple clubs. Like, what is teaching the process of how to make those decisions can be super helpful for students with disabilities. Problem solving, using role play and trying to break things down into steps when they encounter a problem. I know one of the OTs I worked with at the high school, Charlotte, she encountered this a lot at the high school level. The students that would have trouble opening their lockers with a built-in combination lock. And one of the best things she did was she taught the students at the beginning of the year, who do you go to if you can't get into your locker? Where do you go for help? What do you try? Same thing, when you lose your password, you forget your password to your school email address, who do you go to in the school? Like, knowing how to negotiate all those things and navigate all those things can really help students with being more independent in their problem solving. Goal setting and attainment, guiding students to write goals. Students in the US, we have individualized education programs, and they're a written plan for students that receive special education. Students can be involved in writing their goals. Certainly older students can. Younger students can as well. We don't tend to think of that as much, but having the students decide what is important to them and what they want to work on. And then how to break those things down into steps that are attainable and track those steps. Self-regulation, I think I talked about that, and this is something that we address much more intentionally and frequently, I think. But again, the most important thing is learning what to do, but actually being able to apply it in a real life context during the school day. Self-advocacy, I talked a bunch about this too, being able to really ask for help or ask for what you need. Part of that is you first have to know, you have to have self-awareness to know what your needs are, what your strengths are, what things work for you, what strategies, what accommodations help you to function. Internal locus of control, helping students connect what they're doing. Like, you practiced so hard at that, and look, you were successful, you were able to do it. We practiced carrying your tray in the lunchroom for 2 weeks, and now you just did it independently and you didn't drop anything. You did that. Really helping the student to see that their actions have led to success. And in a similar way, for self-efficacy, understanding that that they can be successful, because a lot of times these students with disabilities don't feel as competent as their peers. And I think, there's a lot of ways we can celebrate their smaller achievements and say, you did that, you're able to do that, you're capable. So providing good feedback to really help develop the student's self-efficacy, and also helping teachers to do the same, and parents. And then self-awareness. This is something that we often will do with students when we're evaluating them, kind of looking at strengths and needs, but we don't necessarily incorporate it into our actual intervention or treatment. So really looking at working with the student to develop their understanding of their needs, their strengths, and their interests. I think I'm pretty close to time, but going forward, just some general things: work at all ages, across settings, across activities, across routines. These can be incorporated into so many different activities. It's not a kind of a curriculum in and of itself, but it can be incorporated throughout the day and throughout the academic curriculum. Opportunities for choice making and decision making and problem solving and self-advocacy, all of that. Sharing this with teachers and team members and parents so that they understand and can more consciously think about how to address self-determination and the development of it. Working collaboratively, working at a systems level and at an individual student level, to make this just a built-in part of the day. A couple quick things. I'm Determined project I mentioned earlier. This is a one-pager about identity and self-awareness. Very simple, but can be very impactful. Here's another example. They have lots of forms available on this site. Is a goal plan. So what's my goal? What are the outcomes? What are the next steps? And who are people that can support me in working toward that goal? Student goal setting sheets, you can make your own. But they can be a very useful thing in working with students. You can Google that and get tons of examples as well. All right. So we are at the point of the case study. Sarah, do you want me to read the case study out? And
Yes,
then
I'll frame what's going to happen in the small groups, and then you can read the case studies. So everybody, we will be going into breakout rooms shortly where you will engage in dialogue with your facilitator. We do ask that you turn your cameras on and engage. It's a big part of the learning and application process. And this is the case study that you'll be exploring. You could screenshot it if you wish, but Jan will also take us through. We'll give you a 5-minute warning to come back to the large group, and we'll discuss and also hear from Jan's expertise. Go ahead, Jan.
Okay, so this is Daniel. Daniel is in the first grade, so he's 6 years old, student with Down syndrome. He enjoys helping the teacher and being part of the class activities, but he often relies on the adults around him to make the choices for him. So which center to join, what materials to use, where to sit, who to pair up with, all those kinds of decisions. When given choices, he sometimes freezes and waits for someone else to decide. He's beginning to use picture symbols and short phrases to communicate, so he's not fully verbal yet. The OT practitioner is focused on working with Daniel on decision-making skills and providing supported choices while fostering independence in classroom routines. So the questions for you guys to discuss in your breakout rooms are: how can the OT scaffold choice-making for Daniel so he gradually becomes more independent? Because right now he's freezing when he's given a choice. What natural opportunities during the school day, centers, snack time, classroom jobs, can be used to build these skills, his self-determination skills, and then how can collaboration with the teacher and any other team members, so the speech language pathologist, if there's a physical therapist or whoever else is involved in and the family, strengthen Daniel's opportunities to practice and generalize these skills. So
Great. Thank you so much, Jan. We're going to break out in the breakout rooms. Kelsey, are you able to send us off? We'll give you a 5-minute warning and then we'll come back. So anticipate about 15 or so minutes in the small groups. I'll pause the recording.
all right. So let
Great.
me.
We're welcoming you back from your small groups. We hope that you had some value in your discussions about this case, about your own experiences. We also have time now to reflect as a group and also get the input of Jan. So why don't we kick us off? I'm just going to ground us in our case study with Daniel, and we'll go through each of these questions now. Jan, you don't have to share your screen anymore. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Hold on.
Great. So we had a story here about Daniel, a little case here. And one of the first questions that Jan asked is how can, actually, before we get going, I actually want to address a question in the chat, which is going to launch into our first question. Pardon me.
Yeah.
So there was a question in the chat. Jan, do you see it? And can you go ahead and read it out loud? And
Yeah. So that I don't have wait a minute. So,
okay. So
the question was, what's the difference between choice making and decision making? And that's a really good question, actually. They're very related, but I think for the purpose of this and kind of defining for this for in self-determination, choice making is a simpler thing. So there's two known things, like there's a yellow paper and a blue paper, and you need to be able to make a choice. Or there's pizza or yogurt for lunch, and you need to be able to make a choice between those two things. Whereas decision making is a more complex process. So it's more there's a kind of kids, everyone needs to kind of learn how to weigh the pros and cons, consider different factors in order to come to a decision about certain things. So it's not as clear as a yellow paper and a blue paper. It's more about deciding on a path forward, or deciding on like yellow or blue paper compared to, do I want to be a nurse or or a construction worker kind of thing. Those are very different decisions, like what career you might want to do. So decision making is more involved, and it involves more of a process of learning how to weigh the pros and cons and figure out what is the path forward you want to take, and make that, and how do you make those decisions. So it's usually a broader number of choices in addition, at least in the way that the imdetermined.org site is defining these for this. I hope. Did that answer your question? I don't remember who asked it. I don't have that.
Okay. Well, that's
hopefully
great.
that answered your question. Okay.
Yeah, well, this actually takes us right into our first question, Jan.
Okay.
How can OTs scaffold choice making for Daniel so that he gradually becomes more independent? Does anyone want to launch us off? Kelsey, maybe you can name the different facilitators for me, or we can welcome the group.
Yes. Let's see. Tolu, do you want to explain what your group came up with? And if you're not here, we can.
We had a lot of issues, so we're not able to really do I don't know what happened in the group. We just got out. I don't know what happened. So I'm not sure if Ade Donny or if they were able to carry on with the question at some point, because I don't know. We couldn't really. I also tried that kit though, so maybe. But in my personal opinion, so I think using visual supports and prompting can help, and yeah, gradually also providing some positive feedback after each attempt, then it would help to model the expected behavior, like a role play, and yeah.
Yeah. those are all good things that you can do to really help him to be a little more comfortable. And the feedback I think is important when he is able to make a choice with maybe some visual prompts or visual choices or support to really give him the feedback of you made a choice, you made that choice, and you can do this kind of thing to get that self-efficacy in there, so that he knows that he can do it.
Wonderful. Anyone else before I move on to the next question? Or Jan, do you have any kind of other comments or tips and tricks as the expert for related to this, how OTs can scaffold this?
Yeah, I think a big part of this in my experience in classrooms with the younger kids is that the teachers need to be clearer. And so supporting the teachers to say he really needs to work on this skill. So instead of saying, here's the 12 colors of paper you can pick from, offering him maybe narrowing it down, and so that the choices are much more finite and clear. That might be less overwhelming for Daniel. So making sure that the teacher and any other classroom personnel, adults, know how to kind of narrow the choice making options, and support him on that. Yeah.
Right.
Uh, I sorry, just want to add something from our group. So we also said that that the adults should allow him time to make the choices, and then that he should be told that the adult should make sure that he knows that there's no wrong answer, and that he
Yes.
won't be just for his responses. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Yep. Terrific. Mhm.
Let's move on to our next question. So, oh, pardon me. I was trying to pull things up. Fantastic. So sorry.
I can read it. You want me to
Go
read
ahead.
it?
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
What natural opportunities during the school day can be used to build Daniel's self-determination skills?
Great. Anyone have any thoughts?
Hello, everyone. So, in my group, we talked about, as the Ms. Eunice said earlier, we talked about checking the interest of this child by presenting series of, activities to this child, and then allowing the child to pick or go for whatever they want. And also, we should not restrain the child by time, not be quick. You just have to make your decision now. You just have to, we have to be slow and steady with them so that they can explore their environment.
Yeah, if someone's stressed about making a choice or a decision, putting that time pressure can just make it so much worse. So finding opportunities in the course of the day, the school day, where that time thing is not so big, it's not so much of an issue, where the student can have some time. And also, as was said before, making sure that they know there's not a bad decision. Like, it doesn't matter what color paper you pick, either both are good. Yeah. But other times, does anyone have any specifics about times of the school day that might lend themselves to choice making, or decision making, or any of these skills really, for someone of that age, 6 years old?
Okay, I'll talk about snack time.
Mhm.
I think it's important. And during snack time, you can ask the child to identify, do you want this snack? Do you want this biscuit? That could help to improve their choice.
Yep.
Yes. So I think
Yep.
that's also, yes.
Snack time is a great time to incorporate some of these things. Even before, like, who do you want to sit next to? Which table do you want to sit at? If there's those kind of choices involved in snack time as well, can be incorporated. Yeah. Any other times of day? Basic choices I feel can be incorporated most any time of day. The more involved decision making is something that's probably going to come later for someone like Daniel. I think he needs just those basic choice making and to start to feel that he has some control over that and that it's going to be okay no matter what he chooses. So having those success experiences, I think you can incorporate those throughout the day in so many different ways. So looking at the time, I'm going to read the next question.
Great, sounds great.
How can collaboration with the team, the teacher, the speech language pathologist, whomever else is on the team, maybe family members, how can collaboration strengthen Daniel's opportunities to practice and generalize these skills? So what might you say to a parent or a family about this? How might you get them on board with more opportunities or helping Daniel develop these skills?
From our group, we were saying that we remind the adults that the child is in growing capacity, and they should accommodate Daniel by giving him simple tasks, even in class, like allowing him to choose like which pencil do you want to use, or even at home, like allowing him to choose which meal do you want to have tonight. Yeah, something like that.
Mhm. Anyone else?
Yeah, so hello once again. So from my group, since self-determination is context based, and we just, so yes, in planning goals and setting goals for this child, we will need the team on board. The team will need to come together, both the parents, the speech language pathologists, and teachers. We need to come together to plan and set goals for this child. And also, what planning ahead for the future of this child, there will be reduced learned helplessness. So if everybody comes and collaborate together, this child will learn to be independent, sort of, and then there will be a very reduced learned helplessness. Also, we would find out the strengths and weaknesses of this child easily, because by the time we introduce or we partner with the parents, we collaborate with the parents will be able to bring their opinions, their suggestion about, oh, Daniel loves to sing, oh, Daniel loves, so it will be a lesser burden on the therapists and the teachers in school to find out the weakness and the strength of this child. Yeah, so that's it.
Totally agree with that. Collaborating together with the parents, with the teachers to really to learn more about the student and to make this happen in a way that reduces learned helplessness for sure. Sometimes too, and I mentioned this in the presentation portion, but sometimes working with that individual child and their team is great, and you need to be collaborative because the more you do that, the more you learn about the child and the more consistent you are across the routines and setting that child is in. But also you could take something like this and do a training for all of the staff at school or for all of the parents who want to come to a training to really learn about the importance of these things. Because again, they're kind of components of self-determination. We don't necessarily always work on them directly. We kind of just they're part of what we do, but we're not as focused on them as I think we could be. So doing some sort of more broader training for school staff or for families, I think would go a long way also, in addition to the individual teams working with. Yeah.
Well, Jan, we are up on time, and I want to thank everybody for their contributions and listening and learning and openness for the engaged participation here. Kelsey has put into our chat box a copy of the assessment link, the post-assessment that is required if you indeed desire a certificate for your attendance here. It also informs us of this program and meeting your learning and your professional development needs. So, Jan, thank you very much for joining. Your certificates will all be emailed in the next, or available to you in the next few weeks. And again, our recording will be posted within the next week or so, as well as to our platforms. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in November.
Thanks.
You.